99% we feel of body image spikes are related to something relational, whether it's, a micro moment or a bigger moment. Am I going to belong at this party or feel good about, this date? So as we start to track these things, the sensations that we feel in our body, because our nervous system is reacting to our experience, both with feelings and sensations, it can go so quickly from something I feel in my body to something I feel about my body.
I had one of those days when every mirror I passed felt like I was looking at the enemy. No matter what I did, no matter who told me I looked great, and let me tell you, Chris is great about doing that. He's always saying, you look beautiful, you look lovely. But when we don't believe it ourselves, no matter how much black we wear to slim ourselves, I saw the fat kid. I saw the fat kid, and it didn't matter, right? Have you had days like that? I imagine you have. It's natural. But I will say this, those days do happen less and less because I've learned how to build a healthy relationship with my body. And that really got me thinking about a topic that comes up often. Probably you've had these conversations too with friends, with family. I hear it all the time. What if your body's story held a key to deeper healing? What if the way we see ourselves isn't just about mirrors and measurements, but about connection and curiosity and self-compassion? How about that? Well, today we're diving into the complex world of body image. I know it might be a little unsettling, but it's important that we have these conversations. How it's shaped us, how it holds us back, and how we can transform that relationship with self. I couldn't ask for a better guest to explore this topic, Deb Schachter. She's a therapist, and she's Boston's leading clinician in body image and eating disorder recovery. Deb, you've been helping people unpack their body story for years, the struggles, the resilience, and the wisdom that it holds for 3 decades. And I love this book that you have that you co-wrote with your dear friend, Whitney. And we're going to talk about Whitney too. And the fact that you bring in love and humor and mindfulness and curiosity and self-compassion, all the things that you have created in this body self approach, we're digging in. Let's go there.
Awesome. Where do you want to start?
Let me see. I believe I was about 5 years old. No, this isn't a session. Never mind. Just kidding.
Well, I actually had one thought
Yeah.
when you were talking about something like, don't worry, this isn't going to be too bad or something. And that's how we always start our workshops. We've been running workshops together for over 20 years. And we always start by saying, don't worry, we're not going to make you dance like a leaf. We're not going to make you stand in front of a mirror naked and name your favorite body part. We're going to do this in a way that feels interesting and funny and creative, where people can't believe there could be something creative about this process, because it's actually turning our body image inside out and really getting to know it and really developing our relationship with our body image. So that's very different than trying to change the way you think about your body.
That's a really good way of putting it too, like building the relationship. I'm constantly saying that. It's not about getting rid of a feeling. It's not about disliking a part of yourself. It's really about loving all parts, right? And we talk about parts work, obviously, in the work that we do. But when it really comes to all 2,000 parts of our body, right? And that includes every year that we're on this planet, there are going to be things that we like and dislike about ourselves, but it's the same thing as having a relationship with someone else. You might not love everything about that person, but you still have a relationship with that person. So why are we not starting thinking about that way about ourselves?
Exactly. And most people don't even realize that they can have a relationship with their body image, that there is space between us and our body image. Most people just think we're one and the same, right? And how we feel about ourselves is how we look. And getting space in there is really what Whitney and I are all about. I always describe it as sort of getting the jaws of life in between you and your body image and starting to create more of a dialogue, because there actually is so much information in there. And as you said, the negative body image is important as the positive body image. Learning more about why our body image is spiking is where the gold is. So we really want to get people to start to bring that curiosity so we can start to unpack what's actually in there rather than trying to override it.
You've been doing this for a long time. I mentioned, and I think I even read that you've been doing this for about 30 years,
Yeah.
being a therapist. but also focusing on this area. Can we go back to where this all started? Like, how did you decide this would be your focus? How did Whitney come into the story? And I want to talk about Whitney too, because she's not here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you both wrote this amazing book, had this program, but there's a story behind that. And I'd love to unpack that for those
Yeah,
tuning
sure. It's
in.
actually really related to what we're talking to.
Mm.
So, I mean, I always say I became a therapist before I knew I was a therapist. And when I was, a young kid, I was obsessed with people like Harriet Tubman and Annie Sullivan, who was Helen Keller's teacher. I just thought this idea of working on the healing modalities was just the coolest thing from the time I was very small. I didn't really realize what therapy was until I started therapy in my 20s, which is actually when I had an eating disorder myself. So I started therapy and then I ended up going to grad school. And when I got out, I really was working with all kinds of different folks, but really both the issue obviously of eating disorders was interesting to me. And there wasn't a lot that was being talked about body image. So for those first few years, I was kind of winging it and figuring it out as I went. And then Whitney happened to reach out. She was newly a graduate herself and was really interested in kind of the work that I was doing. At that point, I'd developed a practice and was running groups, and we met. She had just come off being in the Olympics herself as a rower, had an eating disorder in that process herself, which makes sense. She was a lightweight, and there's so much pressure around body size. And we met and became fast friends and bonding over all kinds of things, but started talking about body image in a way that we didn't plan on, but it just happened. And what we started to discover was what it's like to be able to really be open about what's happening there without someone else either, like you said, oh, you look beautiful, or that's silly, or but just really bringing a huge amount of curiosity and compassion to the experience. And when we did that, we realized there's so much more that's happening that affects our body image than we have any idea, because we started to track for each other. Oh, when I'm in this situation, my body image is spiking, and started to again then bring that curiosity. Whoa, that's fascinating. I just had, dinner with my dad, and it was really hard. And I came home and all I could think about was how huge my belly felt in my jeans.
Mm.
There's reasons that this stuff is so connected. And so the more that we can learn to decode that and understand all of the ways that these things inform one another, it's a totally different ballgame. So we
Mm.
started running workshops over 20 years ago. They were small. They were in, gym basements and yoga studios, and ultimately they got bigger, and we kept running them, started running them even for clinicians. And then we decided at the beginning of 2019 to write a book, because we felt like the layout of the workshop really led itself to be a perfect kind of flow for a workbook. So even though it's a smaller book, it's not just a workbook. It actually has exercises to really do what I'm talking about, all this breaking it down and translating, really giving people those tools.
Love that. So it's like a companion, if you can't attend the
Exactly.
workshop, it's the
Exactly.
pocket companion that you can take with you.
Exactly.
And those are good
Exactly.
things to look back on, and have that available to you if you can't attend the workshop, if or even if financials as well, if you can't afford a workshop, if you can't have Deb and Whitney with you 24/7, you can have them poking in your ear saying, "Hey,"
Totally.
right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
so much of the book is really anecdotal about clients, so that people really, I mean, that's so much what I do in my practice too, is the more, we have so much shame about this topic, even though everybody's taking in the same messages. We all feel like it shouldn't bother us, which is a crazy conundrum. So to share the stories of, these different folks, and how compelling their story is of how their body image stepped in to try and help, which is really the language we use, that our body image is really more of like a hero or a heroine trying to help us manage something we don't know how else to manage. So giving those anecdotes, and you're like, oh gosh, that makes so much sense. She had this ill sibling, and she wanted to just keep herself really together so her parents didn't worry about her, and that ended up going into its own direction. Those are the kinds of things that we really need to understand more
Yeah.
and give voice to.
And the connection, like
Yeah.
everything you're saying is connection. We don't do
Yeah.
anything alone. And I think I know when I read books, and as I'm in the process of finishing mine, I
Yeah.
love adding the antidotes. I love reading the antidotes because it reminds us we're not alone in the battle.
1,000%.
even be my own anecdotes, even be your own as the authors of the book. It's like, you're human. We're going through it. We're not just teaching and telling. We're also
Yep.
sharing as human beings, sisters, basically.
Totally. Whit and I actually, in the introduction, tell our story, kind of the one I just told, and we each had a name. This was before we knew anything about internal family systems or
Mhm.
parts work, but we each had a name. I mean, we had many names, but for each other, I'm sorry, for ourselves that we shared with the other. So Whitney's was Fat Temp because she was after the Olympics, in some basement at Harvard where she needed to be after leaving the Olympics, going through divorce, and just needed something that had a steady paycheck that she could count on. But she felt so out of shape because she had been in this epic
Mm.
experience. Also was temping, which didn't feel very fancy after, a very impressive career. And I was crazy raisin because I was 33 and dating and miserable and had just broken up with someone of many years and felt like I was going on these dates it was just when internet dating was starting to be a big thing. So I felt crazy and I felt like I was shriveling up because I grew up in California and all of a sudden I have these lines on my face. So all of my worries about all of a sudden I'm getting too old. So Fat Temp and Crazy Raisin, we talk about with like so much love and endearment now.
Yeah, and that's the humor, right? I mean, we say these silly things, like,
Exactly.
in the moment, it sucked with a capital S, but as we move through it and we look back on some of the things we really were upset about or were hurt about, and it doesn't take away the upset. It certainly is not demeaning or lessening someone's upsets or traumas. But when we look back on those things, I think that's where the humor is such a important part of the
Totally.
healing.
It's sort of the humanity, the
Yeah,
humor and
yeah.
the humanity. Like, oh God, this poor woman, whatever her experience is, sitting on the floor sobbing over 20 pairs of jeans. It's about so much more than the jeans, right?
It also sounds like the name of a band, Fat Temp and the Crazy Raisins.
Oh my God, I love that. And I know Whitney will too. That's great. I
Well,
love it.
I think about that myself, and I've shared this many times on
Yeah.
Holistically Speaking, that when I was 14 years old, 13, 14, around that time, I actually dealt with some serious, like, weight issues, and I know and back then I didn't know why, the control, why am I going to that direction? But I actually went to a weight loss camp, and affectionately, we called it Fat Camp, right? And then there was a TV show that came out, a reality show, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago, called Fat Camp, and it
Oh
wound
my
up being
gosh.
my fat camp. It was my camp. It was the one where
Wow.
I stayed. Yeah, and there were many of
Oh
those
my
back in the
gosh.
80s, right? There were tons of those camps, but they were not, they've grown in a way where they're more of a health and wellness facility and camp rather than just eat, a piece of toast with cottage cheese and blueberries and call it a day. So finding the humor
Mm,
in it is important. But as we get
yeah.
older, as we learn, as we have skills, as we get more in touch with ourselves, I think there's that element, and you and I talked about this before,
Mm,
of that nervous system regulation,
mm,
knowing what's showing up when the body is talking to you, and are you truly listening, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And so can we touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I guess the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to bridge it a little bit, if that's
Mhm.
okay, is that one of our early tools is really looking at what we call a rotary. We live in Boston, so we have these crazy rotaries that go round and round. So we talk about this idea that if we start, we label and really get clear about what might have triggered our experience. So if I use that example from before, having dinner maybe with a parent that was really difficult, we start with that experience and we can actually help people track what their rotary looks like. So have a big experience, have big feelings very quickly. That can move into, I don't feel good about my body, and these are all the things I'm going to do to fix it. So we're really moving around the rotary. And when you do that with people, they're so blown away because they all have their own unique rotaries, even though there's so much universality to that. So to bring that into what you were asking, so often what happens is when we have a relational experience, I mean, 99% we feel of eating disorder, of body image, spikes are related to something relational, whether it's, a micro moment or a bigger moment. Am I going to belong at this party or feel good about, this date? So as we start to track these things, this is the sensations that we feel in our body because our nervous system is reacting to our experience, both with feelings and sensations. It can go so quickly from something I feel in my body to something I feel about my body. So when people often say things like, I literally feel like I'm gaining weight sitting here talking to you, my fingers look bigger, my, butt is spreading on the chair, whatever it is, that's likely something really emotional that's getting expressed through those sensations. And because we obviously all get these messages about our bodies not being right and that they need to be fixed, it becomes this really compelling way to try and manage that overwhelm of emotions and sensations. So that's my bridge. I hope that makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think it's really being aware of those sensations, right? Because, in the
Yes.
nervous system, you're having the autonomic, the somatic, uh, the emotional and the cognitive side of things, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being aware of where it's coming from and showing up for you is important because yeah, you can sit there and be like, "Oh my god, I'm so bloated. I shouldn't have had that piece of cake." It's not the cake, right? Why are we making the cake the enemy?
Totally. Well, because it gives us something to focus on,
Right.
which
And
keeps that
blame
rotary
something.
going,
Right.
right? And
Right.
something we can fix.
Right.
Right? I mean, I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were saying, what if what's happening in the body is really this information that we need to be able to do whatever we want to do next? And what if we can slow that down enough to really translate it? So in our book, really starting to look at the sense the words that people use, because they're really the words for the nervous system, right? So it could be buzzy, it could be tingly, it could be droopy, it could be scratchy, that when you get people to start to actually describe my belly, my bloated belly feels like do, 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 do. And this is one of my favorite things, is starting to see how these descriptors actually relate to other contexts in their life that they may not even realize, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example? Would that
Yeah,
be okay?
please do.
Because sometimes I think examples are helpful.
Absolutely.
So I run a group for women over 40. And one of the women in the group, I think you'll relate to this, I think based on your age reference, but she was talking about being 14 or whatever, 14, 15, and wanting to look a certain way in her Sassoon jeans, which just made me giggle. I'm like,
you just dated us.
I know, exactly. I was like, I think I remember those. Do they
totally
relate to the
remember.
hair products? I don't even know. Anyway, but she was talking about how she just wanted her body to look the same. And I was like, well, what does that mean? So she was describing, she kept going with her arms, like, like a column. Like I don't want there to be any difference. I want it to be one long line. And then I asked her, what else was happening in your life at that time? And that was right when her mom, who was already quite mentally ill, really got dysregulated, and her dad had to come in and actually remove her from the home. So if you think about the language, she's kept saying, I just want my body to look the same. I just want all the lines to look the same. And I asked her, so when you hear about the same versus different, and what did you want to be the same? And she thought, oh my God, like I just went through the biggest change in my life that was terrifying. So if we think about that language, the same and change, starting to get people thinking about what words they're using, and especially when it does line up with these events in our lives that feel so profound.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about the book as well as part of your
Yeah.
process, and I really want to mention it because we
Yeah.
haven't done it so much. Show it up too. So it's Body Image Inside Out: A Revolutionary Approach to Body Image Healing, with Deb Schachter and her co-author and very dear friend Whitney Otto, who is a former
Yeah.
Olympic athlete.
It's a softback, and we've got all kinds of like exercises
Great.
and things you can do.
Love
Yeah.
that. So it is kind of a workbook and
It is,
a book.
absolutely.
Love
You
that.
can read it either way. You can read it for content, but if you want to do the exercises, and we always say, do which ones feel resonate for you. We have like Mad Libs where you're kind of like filling in, like, if my body were blah, 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 then I would feel more blah, blah, blah.
Now you're really dating us.
Sorry, I know I am.
So we've thrown out
Fill in the blank.
Sassoon, we've thrown
I
out
know,
Mad
God,
Libs.
sorry.
And then at the end of this, we're going to have a contest to say, how old are both of us?
Exactly.
I love my Gen X self.
Exactly.
Speaking about that,
Yeah.
you said women over 40. So we're talking about people who are perimenopause, menopausal, post. Where are you seeing that as most of the people that are picking up this book, or?
I'd say no.
Okay.
Although I think that's a really important audience. And we
Yeah.
actually, in the podcasts that we've been doing, we got so many requests from particularly dietitians who work with that age group, because that is an age where our body obviously maybe is changing in a variety of ways that don't make sense to us. And so I think that can really lend itself to having that important conversation about, again, what's happening in our life and how that affects how we see ourselves, especially when our bodies are actually changing, whatever that may be, whether it's weight and size or hot flashes or whatever it is. So yes, 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 that's a great population. But really, one of my favorite things about this book is anybody can read it. We
Mhm.
all have we all have bodies, and we all have feelings about them. And we have so few places to know how to talk about them in productive ways. So when I started to tell people about the book, like I was getting my teeth cleaned by my dentist, who's, he's probably in his 60s. And he was like, is it weird that I want to read the book? Like, is that? And I was like, that's awesome. And when we actually did a very early taping for our, or not taping, that's dating me too, of some video for an Instagram post. Whitney actually has her own podcast with another Olympic athlete called Untrained, and we were using her producer. And in the middle of our thing, he said, "Can I talk about when I went to LL Bean yesterday and I had to buy the bigger shorts, and they felt like a tent, but the smaller ones were too tight?" And it was so awesome. We were like, "Please, can we talk about your shorts? This is the work." So everybody wants to talk about this; they just don't know how.
That's such a good way of putting it. Everyone wants to talk about it, but they don't know how. There is
Yeah,
no one out there that probably doesn't struggle in some capacity with their body image, even an Olympic athlete at the best form that they are. I was just
totally.
watching something the other day with somebody who was a pageant, in Miss
Mhm.
USA. And a lot of times I think we think that's the group that's going to be suffering the most. Like, oh, the supermodels have to eat a carrot a day, or those who are Olympic athletes are on a very strict diet.
Mhm.
But it's like, we're human, and it's not just, I don't think anymore, I think we are now, well, not that, yes, we're still human. What I mean is, I don't think it's only about the outside anymore. I think people are really in touch with what it means to live well, optimally, holistically, whatever the term is you want to use. People are more in alignment with that longevity. So a book like this is also tapping into that side of things. Like, you have to be able to have a good image of who you are and what and how you're showing up in this world and how you want to live well. But if you're not in a good relationship with
Mhm.
yourself, you're just
Mhm.
going to keep having that same cyclical conversation and putting yourself
Exactly.
down.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why we use the rotary,
Mhm.
because we do a second rotary where we bring in our tools. We have sort of three muscles, which are mindful awareness,
Mhm.
curiosity, and compassion. Those are kind of the body image
Mhm.
inside out muscles. And from there, we really build that out so that when you get to these moments where these spikes happen, you can actually start to decode it and ultimately be more connected to yourself.
Mhm.
And that's really, Whitney's a coach. Actually, she's an executive coach. And so brought in the word resourcing, which I think is wonderful. It's like, if we can decode what our body image is saying, then we can start to really figure out what we actually need. So that could be anything. That could be a big fat no, because we don't want to go to the, whatever it is, PTA event. Or it might be, I need more of something, more quiet, more stillness, more nature, more connection. So even something as simple as my arms should be more toned or something can actually get us to, I need more boundaries.
Mm. It's just not always
And
physical.
it's
Yeah.
totally not. And it's why we talk a lot about jealousy and
Mhm.
idealization. And if we can start to lean into some of those things and actually, again, rather than you shouldn't be jealous, you're fabulous, but really think, who are you jealous of and why? Then you can start to really figure out, what is it about their butt or their arms or their, you know, thighs that make their life the way it is. What is it about their life?
Mhm.
And you imagine that body gives them that you actually really want.
Mhm.
And it's so often ease, connection, joy. And that's what we want to help people work on.
Yeah. That's great. Love that so much. And just for
Thanks.
those, as a reminder, Deb has this amazing book she's co-authored with a dear friend called Body Image Inside Out. This is a really wonderful companion to have. There you go. You're so good at the Vanna White. It's a
You
great
taught me
book to
well.
have, and if do you have an audio version?
We don't yet. We're working
Ooh,
on it. We're
okay.
working on it.
Love
We
that.
just got asked to have it translated in Lebanese, though, which I'm so pumped about. I feel so honored. But we're working on that, and we do workshops. Right, we're most focused right now on a big workshop we're going to be doing in the early fall for clinicians and anybody who works with body image. So that could be personal trainers, physical therapists, teachers, doctors, therapists, nutritionists, that kind of thing. And then I'm sure we'll be doing more also in person and virtual workshops
Great.
as well.
And we'll put all of that in the podcast notes, how to
Great.
get in touch with you and Whitney, how to grab this book. All of that will be in the notes of this podcast episode. So, and if you're touch moved and inspired by this conversation, if this is something that resonates with you, or you're like, oh, I know somebody who could really use this conversation, pay it forward, y'all. Like, pay it forward, share it. Yeah, that's my little Southern. I
I
lived
love
down
it.
south for a while, so I have not gotten rid of the y'all.
I love it.
But, pay it forward, share it. This is a collective, it's a community effort, what we're doing here on this planet. So do that. And then, pick up the book. So there'll be a lot of opportunities to see how you can bring this into your life. And, making one change can make a difference. One small change. You
Absolutely.
don't have to do it all. You don't
Absolutely.
have to do the Mad Libs. You don't have to do any of the exercises. You can read it. You can jump around, right? It's a book you can jump around.
Totally. You can read what resonates for you. But I always say to people, if you want to do one thing, which is really at the core of our work, it's just starting to notice when your body image gets louder. So it's going from, I look like shit today. I hate the way I look. I'm so fill in the blank, to, wow, my body image is really loud today. The things I'm saying to myself are really nasty. That's a huge jump and a real opportunity to start to practice just starting to track your body image and really start to think of it almost like you're tracking the weather and start to move one step away from your body image. So that's what I always give when I give one nugget. That's the one.
That's a good one too, because negative self-talk is so big. I mean, look, our brains, as you know, as a therapist and being in the space as well, the brain loves to go to the negative. It is a negative Nelly. That's what keeps us alive and safe. So if we can just make one small change on how we're talking to ourselves, like, I hate my body, I feel fat too, I'm working on making a positive change in the right direction. That in itself has the same outcome, just a different message.
Yeah, totally. And just saying, wow, it's really loud today. My body image is loud today. That is very different than I hate the way I
And
look.
accepting it. I love that it's very loud today. It's just being aware and accepting that it's okay not to be okay.
Totally. And that, again, body image, just like any other feeling, comes in for a reason.
Yeah.
It's trying to help.
Yeah, definitely. So where would you like to see things go with this book, with the whole idea of what you're doing? Like, what's your view on how you see things going
Oh,
forward?
I love that. So I think our fantasy would be, I don't know if you know Dr. Becky. She's a great parenting coach. Do you know her at all? She's
I do not.
Oh my gosh, you got to check her out. She's amazing. She's wonderful. She just has these great nuggets that are just so accessible. So she's really taught a different language for how you relate to your kids. Very similar, lots of curiosity. So for us, it's the same thing. It's like, what if when you go to the doctor and you were to say, my body image is really loud, and they'd say, so what's going on in your life? Why do you think that might be? Like, people starting to share that perspective that body image has a much greater function. And that negative body image is, I kind of describe it like an indicator light on our car, like, windshield wiper fluid and low battery charge, that it's just an indicator light that something else is happening. So if we could have that in more settings, teachers, PTs, so many people that come face to face with this and don't know how to respond, so that people have more skillful ways to say, that's usually a sign that something else is happening in your life. I wonder what that might be. Maybe that's something you can work on, whether it's in your own therapy or journal or whatever, but starting to really build a practice of noticing when your body image gets louder and really trusting and believing, just like a headache, that it's trying to tell you something, that there's something else that's bumping it up, and that's an opportunity to lean in.
Love that. Okay.
Yeah,
So
teachers, I would love it to be more in schools. We're really trying to get it to counselors at schools, places where this stuff is, popping up everywhere.
there is always room for improvement and growth,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Tree never
For
stops
sure.
growing. Why should we? So I love
I
that.
love
So
that.
is there anything else you want to share that we haven't covered? Because I'm going to play a little game with you, but I want to give you an
Okay.
opportunity that maybe I haven't tapped on something that you'd really like to hit.
The only other thing I guess I would say is that the biggest aha in the book is chapter 5.
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 4 was this notion of we carry our stories in our bodies, as you were just describing. Our body image is the longest relationship. I'm sorry, our body is the longest relationship we'll ever have, right? The longest
Mm.
relationship we'll ever have is with our own body. So we're writing all about how it holds our story and all this like somatic stuff. And somewhere in the middle, I texted Whitney and I was like, oh my God, chapter 4 is going to have a baby. It's definitely another chapter coming through. And it's become the seminal workshop kind of focus is this idea that body image and relationships, there's a huge interplay there, that's really everything. So really empowering people to get curious about what happens in our body image in relationships, both historically in terms of how we were mirrored, what was reflected back to us, maybe not even related to our body image, but what we took in when we were young about who we were, what we were capable of, what our strengths and weaknesses were, what we might be needed to be more of or less of to stay connected, as you said, survival. And then how that can also ultimately inform how we see our bodies and how changing our bodies becomes a tempting way to stay more connected. And ultimately to really notice in the moment when you leave, like what you were saying, I feel like all of a sudden my stomach's so bloated. When we leave an experience where all of a sudden we're focused on our body, what do I feel so full of? What am I really holding inside? Maybe it's unexpressed anger, maybe it's hurt. Really starting to track the interplay between our relationships, both historically and in current day, and really notice how that affects our body image. Because that's ultimately, we really believe that's where all the gold is in that interplay.
Love that. How difficult
Yeah.
was it to write a book with someone else? Like, how did you divide those duties with Whitney?
Oh, it's such a great question. We both feel so unclear about how any of this happened at this point, where both our heads are still spinning. But what was so cool, honestly, was that so much of the nature of it, the flow of it made sense, but we learned so much more about what we knew as we wrote. So we really wrote most of it together. There were truly, I think maybe hundreds of iterations of edits. Whitney's husband is actually a CBT expert and author, so he was amazing. My husband is a scientist, but an excellent punctuation master. So we had lots of eyes on it. But really, the actual content. I think the coolest part was that all these things came out that we didn't know existed, and how do you decode, but how do you actually break that down in an exercise? But it really was very collaborative. We did very little. We did a lot independently once it was down, but all the editing. But really, we wrote it together. And Whitney really brought in this beautiful piece at the end around the resourcing. I think we didn't know exactly where we'd land, and it ultimately was like, what do you do now that you have all this information? And those last couple chapters are really her swan song. They're beautiful and really using a lot of different tactics to get more at like how do we learn how to resonate in what resonates for our body. And as Mary Oliver says, let the soft animal body, which we always love what it loves.
Mm-hmm.
How do we really let our animal body inside kind of lead us to what our truth is? So it was very collaborative. Not always easy, but very collaborative in terms of really what we wanted to bring to the world.
Yeah, to work well together. It was meant to be. I love that about the
Yeah.
soft body inside.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Let the soft animal body let the soft animal body love what it loves.
I'm gonna
That's
look
Mary
that up. I
Oliver.
love that quote.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
so
beautiful
like I
poem.
felt that. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
like really giving it some nurturing. How often do we nurture ourselves? Look, that's part of the work I do is the self nurturing approach when I'm working as a havening practitioner. But I'm like thinking about that.
So helpful when you can say, "Oh, I feel this. So what do I need? What needs nurturing?"
What needs
I
nurturing?
feel so depleted after, this really hard day at work where I had to fire 10 people or something. What do I need? What do I need to take in? What do I need? Maybe it's to just release whatever. So
yeah,
learning
that
what
is
those
so
key
pretty.
things
I
are.
love that. That's a great way to lead into the next thing. But actually, that's a good way to close this. But I still got something for you.
Okay.
I play a little game
Oh,
with
yeah. Okay.
my guests called Brain Candy. It is a rapid fire game, meaning that I've
Okay.
been writing down words that Deb has been saying during this conversation. I'm going to throw one word out at you that you said. I want you to come back and say the first word that comes to mind. Little word
sort of like free association.
Yeah, exactly what it is. It's a word association game.
Okay.
So I'll throw the word out. You come back, have a little brain candy fun. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Self-talk.
Self-listen.
Compassion.
Softness.
Resilience.
Breath.
Relationship.
2.
Regulation.
Rhythm.
Mindfulness.
Spaciousness.
Resourcing.
Listening.
Body image. 2 words, I know.
Inside out.
Body self.
Multidimensional.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, it definitely is. And since body self was one word.
That was what we originally called ourselves before the body image inside out. So we realized that was a verb to turn our body inside out. We were the body self, which is this idea that it's such a multi-dimensional experience of body image, that there are all these dimensions happening in there. It's not just, screen or billboard or TV.
I have one more that I'm going to throw out at you. It's 2 words.
Okay.
Because we got to end with a little humor. Right?
Oh gosh. Okay.
Crazy raisin.
Fat temp.
Like you go right. You're throwing it back to Whitney.
Yeah. Crazy raisin. And also, I would say, I guess, compassion. God bless her 32-year-old heart. If I could tell her, 25 years later, she was going to write a book.
Yeah. What would
Pretty
you tell
cool,
yourself?
right?
What would you tell yourself, Deb?
You're going to get me to cry now.
Then my work here is done.
That's what I say all the time. You're going to write a book about crazy raisin. You're going to write a book about how scary it is to be single at 32 and all your friends are dating. And you're actually going to make it to 41 and still be single. And then you're going to meet this amazing human. So it's all going to be okay.
It checks all the T's and the I's.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. That's so great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything that you would want to share with those who are tuning in?
God, I think you covered it so beautifully. I feel so lucky. I feel like one of the challenges in this is sort of some of it can feel, like you're sort of saying the same things over and over. And I feel like the way you asked questions today was just really fantastic and really got us talking about a lot of things that I don't get to talk about as much. So I really appreciate your lens on all of it. So I think we covered it.
I appreciate that. I always say, and people who tune into this show know that I feel like every person I have on this show is like a masterclass for me too. I don't know everything,
so cool.
right?
Yeah.
And so I sit here with amazing guests like yourself, and I think, gosh, I just want to hang with her.
I gotcha.
I got to get up to Boston.
Yeah, totally.
It's a conversation more than anything. We're human beings. We have to have these open conversations, and I'm really glad you felt that way.
But you asked great questions. You really did.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, my friend, if you find that this conversation has been helpful, if you know somebody who might find it valuable, consider paying it forward, passing it along. Do yourself a favor. Make sure that you are downloading Hilistically Speaking so that you have these episodes when you need them the most. Pay it forward, leave a rating or review. It's always appreciated. And I'm going to connect you with Deb, so I promise you that. If you are interested in getting in touch with her or connecting with her or even grabbing the book, Body Image Inside Out, a book that she co-wrote with her dear friend and former Olympian Whitney Otto, I'm going to put that all in the notes of this podcast, so you don't have to search for it. You can just click the button, grab the book, get in touch with her, follow her, and make that connection, right? Because it's all about connection. We also talked about self-regulation during this conversation, and that is my jam, so I want you to check out one of my Havening happy hours. Come and join me live online. I do these every month. It's a chance to self-regulate and self-soothe for self-care with self-havening and neuroscience on your side. I welcome you, and I would love to see you there. And I think the best way to close this is to mention part of that poem by Mary Oliver that Deb mentioned. It's called Wild Geese. And I leave you with this. You don't have to be good. You don't have to walk on your knees for hundreds of miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. How about that? So on that note, know that I love you, I believe in you, and I'm sending hugs your way. Be well.
I know that